He built the company from nothing, but no one knew his face. When he went undercover as a regular employee, he caught his own manager abusing his power. And what happened next left everyone speechless. The lunch rush at Benson's supermart was in full swing, with long lines of impatient customers, beeping registers, and employees scrambling to keep up. No one paid attention to the quiet, middle-aged man in a worn-out polo and khakis, stocking shelves near the front. He looked like just another worker. But in reality, he was the owner. James Benson, billionaire and CEO of one of the largest retail chains in the country, was standing in his own store, completely unnoticed. He had spent years at the top, running numbers, approving expansions, trusting others to handle day-to-day operations. But lately, he had heard disturbing reports. High employee turnover, complaints about toxic management, and worst of all, an increase in missing money from the registers. So James did what no one expected. He went undercover. For 2 weeks, he had been working as a low-level stalker, observing everything. Most employees were hardworking, but one person stood out for all the wrong reasons. The store manager, Carl. Arrogant, rude, drunk on power. James had watched him berate employees, cut shifts for no reason, and hover near the registers a little too often. But today, Carl did something that made James see red. At Register 4, a young cashier named Emma was ringing up customers, moving as fast as she could. Carl leaned against the counter, watching her with a smirk. "Pick up the pace, sweetheart," he muttered loud enough for customers to hear. "Maybe if you smiled more, you wouldn't mess up so much." Emma's hands shook slightly, but she didn't talk back. James narrowed his eyes. He had seen enough. Then Carl did something worse. As Emma counted out change for a customer, Carl suddenly reached over, grabbed a few bills from the register, and stuffed them into his pocket. James froze. The cashier gasped, "Sir, what are you doing?" Carl smirked. "What I always do. You'll take the heat if anyone asks, so unless you want to lose this job, keep your mouth shut." James gripped the edge of the shelf. That was it. Carl had no idea who was standing just a few feet away. And in less than 5 minutes, he was going to regret everything. James clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. He had built this company from the ground up. He had trusted people like Carl to run it. And now, here he was, watching his own manager steal money and intimidate an innocent employee. Emma's face turned pale. "Sir, you can't just take..." Carl leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I can do whatever I want. And if you open that little mouth of yours, you'll be out of a job before the end of your shift." Emma's hands shook as she closed the register. She had no choice but to stay silent. Carl smirked, turning to walk away, until a voice stopped him cold. "Hey, Carl." Carl turned around, irritated. "What?" James stepped forward, dropping the last box of stock onto the shelf. His expression was calm, but his eyes were like steel. "I think we need to talk." Carl scoffed. "And you are?" James smiled slightly. He had been waiting for this moment. "You know, it's funny," James said, crossing his arms. "You spend 2 weeks working somewhere and you start to notice things." His voice dropped. "Like managers who steal from the register." Carl's face darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about, stock boy. Mind your own business." James took another step forward, his voice turning sharp. "This store is my business." Carl rolled his eyes. "Oh yeah? You think you own the place?" He laughed, looking around at the employees who had stopped working to watch. James reached into his back pocket and pulled out his sleek black leather wallet. Then, right in front of everyone, he took out his ID and held it up. James Benson, CEO and founder of Benson Supermarket. The entire store went silent. Carl's smirk vanished. His face turned deathly pale. Emma gasped. Other employees whispered in shock. James tilted his head. "What's wrong, Carl? You don't look so confident anymore." Carl stammered, taking a step back. "Sir, I didn't know." "Oh, I know you didn't know," James cut him off, his voice like ice. "Because if you had known, you wouldn't have stolen from my business. You wouldn't have threatened my employees." He leaned in slightly. "And you sure as hell wouldn't have treated people like garbage under my name." Carl opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. James turned to Emma. "How much did he take?" Emma's voice was shaky. $40, sir." James nodded. Then he reached into his own wallet, pulled out 2 crisp $100 bills, and placed them on the counter. "For your trouble," he told her, "and for the months you've had to put up with this." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sir." James turned back to Carl, his expression stone cold. "You're fired." Carl staggered back. "Sir, please, I need this job." "Security," James called out, not even looking at him. "Get him out of my store." 2 security guards appeared within seconds. Carl tried to protest, but they didn't listen. In front of all the employees he had bullied for months, he was dragged out the door. James turned to the staff, his voice firm. "If anyone else in this store thinks they can abuse their power, steal from my company, or mistreat their coworkers, let today be a lesson." The employees stood in stunned silence. Then, one by one, they started clapping. James looked around the store, the place he had built, the people who actually cared about their jobs. He realized something then. It wasn't the store that was broken. It was the people running it. And starting today, that was going to change. For good.